running for 10 days now, and we were all feeling tired. We'd stopped a lot to rest and eat, and when we ran again, I noticed that my legs didn't hurt quite so badly. We'd run through the night, too, but there was still no sign of anything ahead of us, and our food and water was almost gone. We passed a building with an airfield above it, but no planes were flying there, so we kept going. We were starting to think we might make it. Maybe it would just be a matter of a few more days, but we still didn't know for sure. I was getting a little nervous, though. "We're almost there," said Eddie. "We've got to stop running soon, or we're going to burn up." "You're right," said Mark. "I've got to stop sometime, too." "Me, too," I said. "I'm feeling really weak." "That's because you haven't eaten for days," said Eddie. "I know that," I said. "It's because I've been running so hard." "We've got to stop and rest," said Mark. I was too tired to argue, so we stopped running and sat down, and it felt good to sit down. "Let me see your map," said Eddie when he saw Mark holding it. Mark handed it to him. "Is there anything there?" "Just the airfield we passed," said Eddie, looking at it. He handed it back. "Nothing else." "And it doesn't matter where we are," said Mark. "We'll just keep on going straight ahead." I looked at the map. "Is that really all right?" I asked. "Sure," said Mark. "It's only about 10 miles from here." "We can do it," I said. "We'll run from here until we get there, and we'll just walk a few miles and camp." "No," said Eddie. "We can't do that." "Why not?" I asked him. "Because we'll never make it," he said. "I told you, we don't know if there is anything there, but it doesn't matter, because we're never going to get there anyway." I didn't know what he meant, but I could tell he was upset about something. "What are you talking about?" I asked him. "I can't tell you," he said. I was surprised to hear that he couldn't tell me, but I wasn't going to press him. If he didn't want to tell me, he probably didn't want to tell anybody, and that was his right. It wasn't my business anyway. "Don't worry about it," said Mark. "If you don't want to say anything, don't say anything." Eddie looked at him. "He's right," he said. "I don't want to talk about it right now. Let's just rest." Mark nodded. "We need to get some food in us," he said. I looked around. The road had been dry for as far as we could see, but there was no water anywhere. "I thought we'd find some water by now," said Eddie. "I guess we're not going to be able to." "I'll go see if I can find something," I said, and I got up and started walking toward the city. The city was about 2 miles away. The buildings were old and run down and falling apart, and the streets were empty. There weren't even any cars anymore. They'd all been stolen long ago for parts and fuel and anything else that they could use. I didn't know if people were still alive there or not. Probably not. I walked past a bunch of houses, looking for something to eat. There were signs of people living there. In the front yards, there were cars and motorcycles that were just lying there, rusting away. And there was an old house with windows broken out of it and a dog living in it, who barked at me as I walked past. I went down a few side streets and found another house that was a lot worse than the one with the dog in it. The door had been kicked in, and the place was full of people lying on the floor, dead or unconscious. It looked like a riot had been going on there, but I didn't see any bodies lying around outside, so I couldn't tell what it was about. I walked around the house and saw that it had a basement, so I went down there and looked around for something to eat. I didn't find anything, so I came back out into the street. A few more streets, and I came to an alley that was blocked with a bunch of rubble. All of the houses on both sides had fallen in, and the street was just a big hole with a pile of dirt at the bottom of it. There was nobody in the street, but there were signs that people had been there not too long before, so I started searching around through the rubble to see if I could find anything to eat. I found some things that looked like they'd still be good to eat, and then I went back up the street and started walking around looking for something to drink. The water had probably gone bad a long time ago, but I thought maybe there'd be some good food and water around, too, if I looked for them in the basements of the houses where the people lived. There wasn't much water. It must have all been used up years ago, or been taken away for use somewhere else. The only food that I found was some canned stuff, mostly tomatoes and corn and beans that was so old it was hard as rock and had grown little green shoots out of the top of it. I left it alone. I found an old refrigerator that still worked and filled it with water, which would last me for a day or so anyway. And then I walked back down the street and came out of the hole I'd been hiding in and headed for our hideout. When I got there, Mark had built a little fire to cook our dinner. It wasn't very big, and we weren't going to eat a lot, but it would be warm and give us something to sit beside while we ate. We all gathered around it, except Eddie. He was lying on his back at the edge of the firelight, staring up into the sky. He was always saying strange things, and we'd never know what he meant by them. It was hard to tell what he was thinking, but he was never happy about what he was doing. Sometimes he'd seem mad at us for no reason at all. Sometimes he seemed happy, but that never lasted long. It didn't make any sense, what he was doing. We couldn't figure him out at all. And sometimes he scared us a little, but he didn't scare us like he used to. Maybe we just got used to him. "I think we should have picked a better place," said Mark. sitting down on a rock beside the fire. It's too close to the city. There was nothing else out here, I said, and there's nowhere else we could go. How far do you think we have left? Asked Mark. I didn't know how far we'd come. We'd run for so many days that I didn't really know how far we'd come. Our legs were so tired that we could barely walk anymore, much less run. But I knew that we'd run farther than this, because there weren't any houses around us anymore. So I guess that we had only about 5 days left before we had to get somewhere where we could get food and water. I don't know, I said, but we still have to get out of here. We don't have enough food left to make it 5 days, said Eddie, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. We don't have enough food now either, said Mark. If we go any further, we won't make it. I hadn't thought about that before. We could probably go about 3 days without eating anything, but after that we wouldn't last very long. Our bodies needed food to make new energy to keep us going. But we were so hungry now that even a small bit of food tasted good to us, so we decided to save as much as possible and then stop and rest when we ran out of it. It wouldn't be long now. What's that? Said Eddie, pointing up at the sky. We all looked up. At first it was hard to see what he was pointing at. There was a dark spot on the horizon that wasn't moving, so we thought he must be pointing at a cloud. But then we realized that it was a plane, flying high above us in the dark sky. We could see its lights and then the spot would disappear behind a cloud and then reappear again. Slowly moving across the sky. The plane must have been a long way away. It didn't come down any lower than it was when it was above us. It flew back and forth in the same pattern for almost an hour, never getting any closer or moving any faster. Finally, it disappeared altogether. It must have been landing somewhere near the city because we didn't see it anymore. It's nice that they're trying to help us, said Mark, sitting back down next to the fire again. We need all the help we can get. Eddie shook his head. They're not helping us, he said. They're not even trying to help us. What are you talking about? Asked Mark. That's their way of telling us to keep running, said Eddie. I don't get what you mean, said Mark. You mean they're going to drop bombs on us? No, said Eddie. They're going to drop bombs on this place. He pointed to where the city had been. It's their way of telling us that they're going to destroy this whole area. I knew he was right. I'd already figured that out myself. Why are they going to do that? Asked Mark. Because there's no one left alive here now, said Eddie. The city is full of corpses. Mark didn't say anything. I looked at Mark and Eddie, and I could see that they both knew what was going to happen in the next few days. But they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to think about it. I had thought about it all the time, and I knew it was coming closer and closer, and there was no way of stopping it, but I still didn't want to think about it. It seemed like something you'd never want to happen. You'd rather think about anything else in the world instead. It was something you didn't want to think about unless you had no other choice. If you could stop it from happening, you wanted to stop it. But if you couldn't, then you didn't want to think about it at all. You wanted to pretend it wasn't going to happen until it did anyway. We've got to go somewhere, I said to them. Mark looked up at me. Where? He asked. Anywhere, I said. Somewhere where they won't find us. There's nowhere left, said Eddie. This is the only place we can go. Mark looked up at him again, his face hardening in anger, and he jumped up off the rock and stood in front of Eddie, his hands on his hips, staring into his eyes. I'll say it again, he said quietly. There's nowhere left for us to go. Eddie turned away from him and looked back down at the fire. We don't have any choice, he said quietly. We've got to go where there's people. We can't go into the city, said Mark. They're going to bomb it. Eddie turned his head back toward him. Then what are we going to do? He asked him. Just run back into the desert? No, said Mark. We'll stay out of sight until they leave. He stopped talking for a minute and looked back at me, waiting for me to answer him. I didn't say anything, so he turned back around and stared at Eddie again. We'll stay out of sight until they leave, he said again, but this time he was talking to Eddie and not me. He wasn't asking me what I thought, he was telling me. And I knew what he was going to do, and I didn't want him to do it, but I didn't want to say anything about it because then he wouldn't do it, so I just kept quiet. Okay, said Eddie. He sat down again on top of the rock by the fire, and after a while he started to look up at the sky again. He didn't say anything more about it.